Thanks all for attending today. Today we're going to be discussing the impact of generative AI on phishing in the marketplace today. My name is Dan Housen. I am the CTO of Recon Technologies, and today I'm joined by Narazi from Proofpoint. Mate, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for that introduction, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to be here today because AI-powered phishing is a challenge I regularly tackle at Proofpoint. As a security engineer, I work closely with clients to enhance their cybersecurity defenses against exactly these type of challenges and help them get the most out of Proofpoint solutions.
Yeah, right. Today we're going to take a bit of a different tack on everything that's been done in webinars before. Often webinars are very much just about product pitching, if you want to call it that from there. Instead, Narazi are going to take on an attacker and a defender approach to how we're going to combat phishing attacks. I'm going to act as the attacker, all right, and Narazi from Proofpoint is going to act as the defender. We are going to hold questions to the Q&A session at the end. If you do have questions or burning questions that pop up, please feel free to pop them into the chat and we'll try to address them at the end of the actual session itself.
Definitely happy to wear the defender hat here because it looks like I'm going to the gym as well, Dan.
Mate, I was just going to say, mate, that's quite a good character here. When was the next time you go to the gym at the moment, mate?
All the time, everywhere.
Everywhere, mate. Fair call. So let's talk a little bit about AI in phishing. All right. AI in phishing is not new. It's been around since the late 2000s. The big difference between what's been happening today and what's happened historically is the cost related to delivering phishing attacks via AI. In the late 2000s, early 2010s, it used to be thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to launch an attack. Yet it is now even less than a few $100s, as you can see, yeah, to do the same thing, and it has more coverage. Phishing is just the entry point, all right? It's the first line that's used. Once people can compromise in there, they are focusing on lateral movement. So therefore, if you are affected by a phishing attack, it's more than likely that the attackers will use something like a ransomware attack or attempted unauthorized access. Nothing more shows this one than the reported breaches from cyber.gov.au on the right-hand side. Phishing is by far the largest impact on breaches today, and the ACSC has actually specified that phishing leads to unauthorized access, ransomware, malware, and business email compromise. So phishing is a monster issue across the board. But that's not just the issue, is not the only issue we have to deal with. The impact to business is actually also pretty heavy. And nothing more than the recent update from Microsoft, or the impact on Microsoft, when basically a phishing email got sent out from Microsoft in June 2024 to over 4 million people. And it said MS Update is sending this information out. Microsoft got 700,000 support cases across the board for that. That's pretty big, all right? That's 700,000 people who had to click, check, validate, confirm there was a phishing attack across the board. The impact to business is pretty heavy. If we start talking about how AI is being used, all right, the AI model associated with that one is pretty inventive. From an attacker's perspective, all I have to do is identify my target. I have already built my large language model behind that one. And when I identify my target, it could be an individual, it could be a company, it could be a community group. I'm going to put that information into my large language model. That large language model is then going to go out and query social media, going to find the email addresses, find any associations that are on public information available, and I'm going to grab that information in the large language model itself. I'm going to look for things like friends, associates, the tools and systems that organizations use across the board, companies, colleagues, interests and likes. I'm going to factor all that one into large language model to give me good reconnaissance information with regards to the target itself. And then from that one, I'm going to use that information to create a targeted email. All right. That is going to be related to, what is that person interested in? Who are their known associates? Do they have any certifications on particular tool systems, whether it be on LinkedIn or Facebook itself? All right. I'm going to generate an email that's targeting to that individual itself. And I'm not going to be asking for anything other than them to read the information. I might even put a legitimate URL with an offer from a spear phishing website I've created itself to actually show the information that is legitimate. And my goal is to request a response, a reply to the email, and from that one in my large language model, I'm going to have follow-ons for that one that are going to send more emails to them with more relevant content based on that reply itself. So in that fashion, it's pretty sophisticated across the board. And I can build a multifaceted phishing email with over 80 variants in under 10 minutes. All right. I will send it via Yahoo, Outlook, Google, doesn't make a difference in that circumstance, and it is not going to get blocked. Yeah. Nosy, big question. Yeah. How are you going to defend against that one?
Dan, you really meant business when you said you were an attacker, didn't you?
I'm a bit of an attacker, yeah.
Right. As a defender, I'm going to put myself in the vendor's shoes to address a couple of challenges that I can think of, right? So the first one I think is probably going to be dynamic detection. So Dan, as you're going to come up with these phishing emails quickly mutating, as you said, 80 plus variants in a short time, it's going to overwhelm traditional cybersecurity defenses, right? So static detection methods like signature-based or rule-based systems are going to struggle to keep up. That's the first one I can think of as a challenge. The second one is probably another important one, is increased false positives, right? So vendors are pressurized to tighten the filters, which can potentially mark legitimate emails as threats. So which is going to be a big problem, especially as attackers make phishing emails look more authentic, with the help of AI as well, right? So those two are the main ones I can think of, more from a vendor perspective.
What about from a customer side of things, mate? Like, how are customers dealing with this one from your side of things?
Right, and as a defender, I'll answer this based on some of the conversations that I've been having with customers and how they're dealing with it. So different customers are dealing with it different ways. So some of them are scrambling around with policies and rules, so to keep up with the threats, right? But some have found it to be challenging to keep with the ever-changing threat landscape. So it's been a very very big challenge.
Yeah.
Some are actually relying on security awareness training to educate the users and trust them to make informed decisions. Again, it's a big call,
It's a
but they
big,
are trusting on the users. Yeah.
yeah.
Now, now the third one I can probably think of is, some are completely reliant on MSP to support who use relevant tools and products from vendors
Yeah.
who take on a defense in-depth approach, such as using secure email gateway alongside AI-driven threat detection tools. Again, that's a key word here. Dan, you got to fight fire with fire here, right? You have to try and stay ahead, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Fair call. And look, the challenges are exactly what you're saying here right now. Yeah. When I send an email out, it's going to look legitimate. All right. It's going to come from either public domain. It's going to come from, maybe I might set up a temporary domain in that instance itself. I might even use someone I've already compromised in the past itself. When I actually put my links in there, as I said right at the beginning, I'm going to start using the legitimate links. Yeah. So it's going to bypass a lot of the traditional security measures that are in place at this point in time. And yeah, I'm going to make sure that when I actually build my variations in my large language model itself, I'm going to have so much variation that standard pattern matching is not going to necessarily work. There are some phraseology aspects that could capture it itself, but yeah, in a lot of parts, one email might get blocked, but another one will get through. Yeah. So I'm going to look at multiple different ways of evading the standard traditional mechanisms for email security. Yeah. So yeah, how do we approach this one? How do we combat this one, Nosy?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. So after you've covered those challenges, now I can probably quickly explain how we can address these AF-based phishing and other advanced threats. The approach we need to take is really the defense in-depth strategy that I talked about, right? It has to be coming from the different layers and different engines that we need to rely on, right? So what we're really looking at here is the defend and step strategy that we actually put together and how we actually combat these type of threats here. So as you can see it on the bottom, you have the three detection engines that we're using. So the first being the threat intelligence-based detection, and then we're using leveraging the AI and ML here, which is the semantic AI, and we're using the behavioral AI. So to start off the story, first of all, so there are, there are going to be three different stages, right? An email goes through a journey starting from, from the sender to a receiver. So the first stage being the pre-delivery. This is basically before the email reaches the user's mailbox. And then the post-delivery is basically an email sitting in the user's mailbox. And then the click time is basically when the user starts interacting with it, right? So the emphasis is really on stopping the email before it ends up in the user's mailbox, because we don't want that to be ending up there and users interacting with it, right? So that's why the pre-delivery is the most important stage of this process here. So the way we're tackling this, I'm going to start from the left-hand side, starting from the green column there. So the DMARC and not, so obviously verifying the sender authentication with SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records. And then we move on to the threat intel and static analysis. So here's where the detection engine filtering based on threat intel data, such as IP reputation or web reputation, comes into play. And then we move on to the static analysis, where we actually run through the URL link and attachment analysis and look at what's malicious about it. And the next one, obviously, is where the leveraging of AI and ML comes into play. This is where we're using the semantic and behavioral AI to analyze the message intent and identify the anomalies based on the actual message. I'm going to cover this in a little bit more detail, so I'll quickly touch on it, and then I'll come back to it later. Now, moving on to the next one is really around the sandboxing. So now we take a step further, and we're actually doing a pre-delivery sandboxing for attachments and URLs. Now, the key highlight I want to put forward here is the pre-delivery URL sandboxing is an industry-leading innovation. We actually proactively hold and block suspicious URLs. So as you can imagine, URL is the number one threat in an email that can lead to compromising accounts, etc., and getting information from that point onwards. So as you can see here, we've put the emphasis basically on the pre-delivery and making sure that email doesn't end up and going to the next stage of a user's mailbox, right? So that's the pre-delivery. Now moving on to post-delivery, there's a couple of things here. We got the response automation and adaptive email security. I want to touch on response automation. So post-delivery component really works hand in hand with the click time side of things, because as you can see, the email is sitting in the user's mailbox. The user can interact with it. So say, for example, if there was a scenario where the email had a link in it and was actually cleaned at the time of the delivery, but then it was post-weaponized later. So basically what happens at this point is the user clicks on it and sandboxing kicks in, and then it will then call in what we have an automation in play, what we call as the email SOA solution, which is what we call the threat response auto pull. What that's going to do is going to pull the email out of the user's mailbox if it is found as malicious, right? Not just
You're actually basically telling me you can actually do it for the post itself, not just the one
exactly.
post, but for, let's say that email's been sent to 10, 15, 20 different people within the organization. You can pull all of them, or is it just for the user that might have had an impact across the board?
Great question there, Dan. So it not only pulls the email from that one particular user, it actually pulls it if you had forwarded to different users in the organization. So because we're not looking at the email, we're looking at the message ID, right? So, and then we pull everything out. So this is all automated, right? There's no manual intervention at all, right? So that's the response automation component. Now, so boosting the capability more from a post-delivery perspective, what we're doing is an introduction of this adaptive email security, which is coming in early 2025, which is our API offering that integrates with Microsoft 365 Graph API, which is a complete threat detection stack, which uses behavioral signals and threat intel, right? So we're going to have like 250 plus behavioral signals across 100 plus detection models. So that's going to really boost the capability more from a post-delivery perspective, and then stop all these advanced attacks, right? So I want to just wrap it up and summarize this whole slide. So in summary, what we're really trying to do here is, the new bar for email security vendor is to provide a complete and continuous protection end to end without any fragmentation. We don't want point solutions, for doing certain things in this layer. So we want a complete end-to-end solution, and that's what we're really focusing on here.
Very cool. Matt, you mentioned a little bit around semantic AI and behavioral AI. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the real differences between those type of things in context?
Yeah, sure. Let's break this down a bit. You got the slide up there, which is going to explain all of that. So the semantic AI, let's look at that first, right? So the semantic AI detection engine is powered by a large language model, and it is an industry first pre-delivery. So we're going to have this done pre-delivery because I showed you in the previous slide was sitting in the pre-delivery, and it uses semantic analysis to understand the message intent. So basically, we're trying to understand what is the threat actor really trying to do here? What is the intent behind it, right? So semantic analysis, what does it actually mean, right? So semantic analysis is a process that is used to understand the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences within a given context, right? The aim here is to extract the underlying meaning and intent from the text data, right? So to put this, to make it more clearer, to give you an example, say if there was an email sent to user asking them to immediately update, account information, right? Then
Mhm.
semantic AI is going to recognize it and that it contains potential malicious intent. Obviously, there's some financial indicators here, asking people to do certain things and actions, then it's going to flag it, right? So that's where semantic AI will come into play. Now, one thing to note is it's looking at the intent, but it doesn't really look at or cater for user interaction component or user behavior component, right? So you'll be asking me, hey, what happened with that? How do we tackle that? That's where the behavioral AI will come into play. So the behavioral detection engine is going to help analyze the user behavior and interaction within that email. For example, it helps monitor patterns in user interactions, click patterns and email reading habits. How is the user actually interacting with the email? What are they trying to do in a daily basis? Not just present, but also historical, right? So
Yeah.
we also identify signals and anomalies, in key message attributes as sender, receiver, header, etc. And also look for indicators such as, you're having unusual number of messages coming through all of a sudden. What's happening here? An unusual IP or location, or it might be a newly registered domain or sender, etc. So all of this will come into play, right? So
And
that's how we figure it
yeah.
out.
So but basically what that means is that, yeah, with behavioral AI aspects incorporated in that itself, it's feeding the semantic AI model itself to create better policy. Yeah.
100%, yeah. With all the user interactions and behaviors captured is then fed into the semantic elements, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening here is this collaborative approach is going to help counteract the increasingly complex AI-based phishing that we're going to deal with, or we're dealing with today.
Mm.
So basically, we're using semantic AI to analyze the language and understand the intent and detecting these phishing attempts. And then while we're using behavioral AI to monitor the user activity for any red flags. So
And that eases the balance issue associated with policy development. Yeah. So
exactly.
beforehand, when I was talking about email security in a traditional sense, it's like the challenge is that people are just constantly changing their policy to be able to keep up with all the different variations, the changes, adaptations, and having to create key identifiers, if you want to call it that, from there in the emails. With
Yep.
this, it's sort of feeding that model based on not only how people are interacting with it, but also what people are reporting on. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. So basically, these models can proactively identify threats without needing any specific pre-programmed rules, right? We don't need to look at these rules. So
Yeah.
making the systems more adaptable to new and evolving phishing tactics, right? So
Yeah.
it turns, it helps us stay one step ahead of the attackers, just like yourself.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.
All right. So I've got a question for you then. Just
Oh, yeah.
now that I've given my story, let's make this challenging for you, Dan.
Ooh.
So knowing the different into the approaches that I just mentioned and all of the things that I'm gonna, use in my detection stack, how are you gonna evade?
Ooh, there's a couple of different ways I'm thinking about it in my top of my head. There's my first thought is I'm going to have to go with more of a low and slow approach. All right. The I'd have to build up a spear phishing campaign over time rather than just do a dump and run, if that makes sense. By doing that one, things like the temporary domain stuff I was talking about earlier is probably out of the question. I'm probably going to have to use more permanent options to be able to allow for that low and slow approach to occur. And that actually opens me up to more concerns with me being found out, identified, and issues behind that one from there. My large language model, I'm going to have to add more variants to that one to cater for it itself. And the cost associated with it is actually gone up. So previously it was going to cost me a couple of $100 to be able to do that type of stuff. It's probably going to start costing me $1,000, $2,000 to maintain the actual spear phishing links, maintain the large language model to achieve that one, and obviously having it ready and available across the board. How I would do it though is I send more emails out with more legitimate content in there first. I want to build reputation up within my content group. When I build the content up, it's going to be legitimate, it's going to be appropriate, it's going to have a link on there that's going to go bypass sandboxing mechanisms. I'm going to try and wait and whether they get to a point where there's a good engagement level across the board. Yeah. And then I'm going to, and when I've got that good engagement level, I'll probably ask for people to recommend that they favorite the link in their update on the actual email itself, so that, you know, I can get them to add it to their favorites on their browser, add it to a tab on their system, whatever it may be in that circumstance, so that I have the ability to be able to flip the URL from a spear phishing legitimate link on a redirect, let's say, to something that's a little bit more malicious down the track. That's how I would do it. It's my window is a little bit less, and it's going to cost more.
Definitely, we wanna keep this more challenging for you, right?
How are you going to defend against that one, mate? Because that's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew you would be probably coming up with something creative like that. All right, so let's break this up into two parts. So first things first, let's look at how the user is going to interact with the email as it's present, and then we'll look at your second part, which is the challenging one, where you're wanting the user to save the link onto their favorites, right? So let's look at the first one. So the first, in terms of the interaction with the email, so obviously we're going to, rewrite all these URLs. They're all protected. So as the user clicks on it, it's going to go to a sandbox link every time they click on it, right? So that's going to be protected in that aspect. Now, the second one, which is going to also help with this aspect, is we will use what we call as the URL isolation. So it's basically URL in an isolated browser. So it's more of a live sandboxed environment. So as a user clicks on it, it take them to a live sandboxed environment and an isolated browser. So basically anything malicious, any malicious website is going to completely block, right? So that's the second way I can think of. Now, thirdly, on a post-weaponized scenario, so as the link might have been clean and now you're trying to post-weaponize it. So basically in that scenario, as the user clicks on it and it becomes malicious, I would know that it became malicious. And that's when I'm going to trigger an event to the response automation, which is where the threat response auto pool, my email source solution is going to come into play, and it's going to remove that email out of the user's mailbox, right? So at that stage, my aim is to remove that malicious email out of the user's mailbox. I don't want it to be sitting there, and that's what I'm trying to achieve there as well. Now,
What
the
about
other...
the favorites thing, mate? Like, that's a interesting one. If I can get them to favorite it in that one, how are you going to be able to deal with that one?
Yeah, definitely. That's a challenging one itself, right? So first things first, I want to touch on the human awareness element here. Is the user really, is the user supposed to be saving, a link from a random sender or a sender that they don't trust onto their favorites? Is a question mark. Again, this is where the human awareness elements come into play. That's the first thing I will be looking at. And the second scenario, more from a technical perspective, is basically looking at the URLs, which is now, possibly going to be saved in the favorites. This is where, from an email perspective, it's going to fall out of the email security remit. Again, it's going to fall into the endpoint security remit. So because I lose visibility because there are no clicks that I'm going to be seeing, right? So you'll be thinking, hey, there's a gap there. Maybe I can be successful, but we're going to close that gap for you there, Dan.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a solution in early 2025, or we call this the Zen Web, so Proofpoint Zen Web, which is a browser extension powered by our threat intel, which provides real-time phishing protection, not just on desktops, but also on mobile devices as well, right? So
Nice.
basically, if your intent changes with that link, we will know and we're going to stop it.
Okay, fair. So at this point in time, guys, we might just drop up a second poll if we may, just to sort of get your feedback with regards to how you guys are going about AI, how effective you are in the methods on running phishing, protecting against phishing attacks at the moment. So I'm just going to launch that one. It's only going to be up for about 15, 20 seconds or so. So feel free to jump in and provide your responses.
Couple of interesting questions there, Dan.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll be interested to see what those results look like.
Mate, I'm seeing the live results right now at the moment as I'm going along, and it's a very interesting mix across the board. Yeah, some of the stuff I didn't expect or anticipate. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So we might close the poll for that one, and we'll move on if we can. Beautiful. So one thing we want to talk about is the integrating of these elements. Narazi and I talked about the pre, post, and click aspects, all right? But how these detection engines work in tandem or collectively is actually the critical piece. Threat intelligence is going to give you your malicious URLs, your malicious actors. It's going to give you the indications of compromise issues and compromised domains. The detection engine is going to give you your URL defense, your traffic analysis, your scanning mechanisms across the board. Your semantic AI is going to look at the intent behind the email itself. And the behavioral AI is going to give the users context to how they interact with the emails across the board. If you have one of those elements out, this whole thing sort of semi-falls apart. Narazi, agreed? Yeah?
Yeah, 100%.
If you've got parts of these things, your detection engines or your policies have to take up the flag, if that makes sense. So therefore, if you turn around and look at one component, threat intelligence, it's going to give you who the bad people are. Detection engine, if you don't have good detection structures, then you're not going to be able to do it. Semantic AI is is only going to provide you with the intent aspect.
Intent.
Yeah. The behavioral AI, the user context. Often, traditional email security measures are only focusing on threat intelligence detection engines and possibly semantic AI side of things. Haven't even thought about the behavioral AI side of things. You need to incorporate those elements together across the board. And more importantly, on that side of things, yeah, we've got to turn around and couple this one with some awareness. All right. Behavioral AI gives it a new spin. All right. Gen AI spear phishing attacks. Harvard Business School turned around and said 60% were effective in their experimental testing functions. Legitimate companies may be compromised by traditional methods. Users and awareness and understanding is still absolutely critical. But behavioral AI, with the introduction of behavioral AI into that security awareness aspect, users can actually, the behavioral AI can bring that to the fore and make users aware that this could be suspicious. You can see the email on the right-hand side from Amazon itself on the slide. The user can then turn around and go, okay, I need to look at this and see whether it's legitimate or not. Do I need to report it? Do I not need to report it? It's just enabling the user to have better understanding about what the intent potentially to the email is going to be and whether they want to do something about that one or not. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about authentication on the DMARC side of things. Yeah. Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft have made some changes in what's happening in 2024, late 24 already from Microsoft, and Google and Yahoo have made some announcements with regards to DMARC across the board next year. Google and Yahoo are taking a really strict stance. If you do not have a DMARC policy in place by April 25, your emails will be rejected by Google and Yahoo automatically. What that means is that you need to have a DMARC policy in place for your organization, and you need to be able to make sure you've got your right forwarders profiled in that DMARC policy as well. In addition, Google's doubled down and they are enforcing 0.01 compliance on spam rating for a domain sender. That means 1 out of 1,000 emails, if marked, could push you into the spam box or the junk box or someone's inbox in Google. On top of that one as well, Google is actually adding to that whole mix a button on your browser when you're opening up the inbox to report spammy emails easily. So number one, the 0.01% is pretty harsh in its first place. Number two, if something actually pops up and Google says it's spammy, people only have to do a one-click button press to report you. So therefore, your emails have to be relatively legitimate. Microsoft has already made some changes in September 24 by removing basic authentication for SMTP. So third-party mailboxes can't just send on behalf your SMTP email using basic authentication anymore. They have to have a mailbox with TLS, and they have to have authentication incorporated with that one from Microsoft to be able to send from your domain itself.
This looks really, these dates appear not too far away from start acting, Dan. So I've got a question for you then.
Sure, go.
So with DMARC reject for Google and Yahoo, as you said, it's going to cause some major pain for businesses by the looks of things, considering the email deliverability side of things. Considering most businesses don't know all of their forwarders and senders, what's going to be the impact for these businesses?
Ooh, the impact is pretty big, to be fair with you. Number one, you're going to have a chat with your marketing department to make sure they don't send out, crazy emails anymore. Yeah. Number two is you've got to be able to make sure you've got your right forwarders in place. That's all. So understanding who's sending on your behalf of your domain, who's sending from your domain, is going to be absolutely critical. We can't change the content of people reporting spammy stuff, all right? Because marketing departments are going to be find inventive ways to be able to send emails out irrespective of the situation. But the mechanism and the route they send it out from, you do need to have those forwarders actually profiled out. The big question is, do organizations know what forwarders they're sending out at this point in time? DMARC's never really been at a full reject level at these major providers before. They've had it potentially on a little bit of quarantine. And even Microsoft still has a none in many regards on their side of things as well. With them going to reject, that means if you don't have your forwarders on your SPF records, listed in your DMARC, it's self-effective across the board, your emails are going to go straight to the spam folder, yeah? Or they're just not going to get delivered at all. If you do get too spammy, your whole domain could actually be blocked. And by doing that one, that means every email that you're sending out, whether it be legitimate or otherwise, is not even going to get delivered to Google. And that's a major concern across the board when it comes to the business. Does that sort of answer your question, Rosie?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it looks like we need to start acting then.
Yeah, mate. I don't know. It's going to be really difficult for people to be able to manage that spamming level itself. 0.01 is a massive task. I feel for the marketing departments out there. It's going to be a really tough gig for them to be able to deal with. And on that note, guys, we wanted to, we're a little bit over time, but that's all right. We started a little bit late across the board. Quickly about Recon. Recon was established in 2020. We are a cybersecurity solutions provider working with Proofpoint, working with some big vendors across the board to be able to provide really in-depth security solutions that sort of cater for all these type of magical scenarios, including the Gen AI impact itself we've talked about today. We believe that proactive threat anticipation is the key to success, and identifying of risk whether it be by user or organization, is critical to enduring the cyber resilience. If you do have any questions with regards to that one that you don't want to talk about in the chat today, please feel free to reach out to either of us. Our details are on the screen. Please feel free to reach out, ask any questions. If you have any, if you want a demo or information behind that one, please reach out and call. On that note, what we might do is, I think I have one more poll I have to roll. Do I not? Yeah. Narosi, I might launch a poll quickly and then we'll jump into the QA from there. Is that all right?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. So the third poll is more about security awareness across the board, guys. I think we've got a fair number of responses there, Rosie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Might close the poll and open up to the Q&A side of things, guys. I'll stop sharing my screen now and we'll open up the Q&A. How do I stop sharing? Gotta remember how to do that one. There we go. Now, quickly, has anybody got any questions? What I might do? Jay, are you around there, mate? Or GV?
Hey, Dan. Yes, I'm here.
You're here. Fantastic, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah. Were there any questions that popped out, mate, from your side of things?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. We actually have a couple of questions that have been sent to us in advance for this event. So I'm happy to start off with those.
Fantastic, mate. We've also got one here as well from somebody else. I'll go through that one once we get there. But feel free to shoot, mate. Fire over.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, the first question is, how can a company effectively assess the risk associated with AI-powered attacks? What are some of the strategies there? What are some of the recommendations from your end and Narasi's end, of course?
Fair. So what are the risks itself? You've got to have awareness of the actual email, the email intent early on. All right. Your semantic AI mechanisms are going to be able to detect some of that aspects, but you're not necessarily going to understand the intent. With the generative AI and the user context that's being added from the LLM, it's going to be really hard to be able to detect it. You will see small patterns, and the problem is they are small patterns. Semantic AI is not necessarily going to detect it straight off the bat. You're just going to have to let it through. You're going to have to sort of rely a little bit more on your user to interact effectively across the board to be able to detect it, and you have to see it over time, not necessarily straight away. That's probably one of the big learnings I've found across the board. We've seen that one from quite a few customers over the last probably 4 or 5 months, where they're suddenly getting little emails here, there, and everywhere. Someone from marketing is sitting there and said, "Would you like to sign up for this attack," or what it may be from there. Or what would you like to sign up to? Not attack, to this marketing event. Would you like to join us at this CIO forum or what it may be from there? I see those type of emails all the time, and they could be all part of a potential attack in the future. Rosie, is that very similar to your side of things?
Yeah, definitely. The one thing I want to just add to that is just more, simulating AI-powered attacks in security training, right? So obviously, these are the type of attacks that are coming in. So you want to try and use your security awareness training to try and simulate exactly that. So you kind of know how users react and you can obviously plan for it. Again, we talked about the defense in-depth approach, having both the semantic AI and behavioral AI doing that for us. And also another probable way might be, conducting risk assessments as well, time to time to understand where the users are at as well.
Okay. Any other questions, GV, on that side of things?
I do have a few more, but how about I ask one more, and then I think you have another question to tackle that's already documented in the Q&A chat.
That's right, mate. Go for it.
Great. So balancing security measures with user experience to counter these attacks. What are some of the recommendations for that?
Ooh. I think the user experience side of things, you want to empower the user to be able to know exactly what's actually happening. If the user doesn't necessarily, you can give them as much security awareness training as you like, but bringing it to the fore in the user and enabling the user to be able to make a choice as to whether it's actually legitimate or not is one part of the equation. Bringing that to the fore and showing them that, yeah, this is suspicious is something that a user raises their awareness to it. They can then make a choice as to whether they want to accept that risk or not. Yeah. But it all feeds into that whole thing from there. So user experience is just elevated by allowing for behavioral AI to incorporate with this one. It's bringing their choice into the equation more, but it's also making them aware so that they can keep an eye out for it further. Narazi, do you want to add to that one itself?
I think you covered it all, but one thing I want to just point out is, no email security system is going to be 100% foolproof. There are going to be, emails that are going to get through, but what would be really important is to have an automated incident response plan, right? So obviously, if an email is going to get through, what is the plan of action, and what automation can I have to combat it? For example, an account takeover even occurs. How do I have an account takeover protection to remediate that account from being taken over? So obviously that's what I can think of more from a response. How do we actually do it? Have a plan for it, and then get to the next step.
Yeah. So I'll jump to the question that popped up in the Q&A side of things. I'll read it out loud, Narazis, because I don't know whether you can see it, but with the new DMARC rules in place for the email providers, does this mean that the hackers who want to keep pace will implement these measures and seem more legitimate? They're already doing it. All right. Yep. They've been doing it the whole time. Remember what I turned around and said to you earlier itself about my low and slow approach. Yeah. I turned around and said I'll have to keep my domains up further, my spear phishing sites up further itself. I will have all the relevant security measures, relevant measures for DMARC, SPF, all that kind of stuff in place on those web servers if it's provided. You got to remember, GoDaddy, Google, Microsoft, all those guys do offer the capability themselves to be able to do these type of things, to create these DNS records across the board. I'm going to do that one for these type of things. So yes, they are going to have those things in place. In fact, they already do have those things in place. Narazi, would you say that that's a fair statement on your side of things?
Yeah, this is really a fair statement. One thing I want to just add is, because the DMARC is now being set up and everything, all organizations are going towards it. What threat actors are really focusing on is lookalike domains, right? So they're really wanting to leverage that and then try and send phishing attacks based on these lookalike domains. So it's just really critical to act on it when a lookalike domain pops up. How do we bring it down? How do we have an automation in play to take that down, basically?
Yeah. I think that's all the time we've got today, Narazi. Yeah?
Yep.
Did you have a good time, mate, today?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, Dan.
No, mate, I always have a bit of fun. Yeah, I like the attacker defender approach, mate. Normally, we're all both on the defense side of the things. It feels a little tiring to be on the other side of the coin. Yeah. Look, I want to say thank you very much for coming along, guys. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. The team from Recon will probably reach out to you next couple of days, and we will engage and find out any aspects that you have additional questions on as well. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you, Narazi, once again for presenting with me today. And we look forward to talking with you guys in the future. All right. We will share the results with you on email in a couple of days once it's put into a pretty format. I'm just looking at the format at the moment. It looks pretty ugly. So we'll get it formalized and put it in a format so that you guys can actually see the results accordingly from those polls. Thanks very much for attending, and look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.